Welcome to Here to Be Human, a multi-dimensional soul. This is not just a podcast, it's a remembering. A space where soul meets skin and the sacred meets the messy. Where spirit is not something you escape into, it's something you embody here in this beautiful, chaotic, breathtaking human life. Each episode is a living transmission, a weaving of energy, truth, reflection, and remembrance, with questions for your soul, messages from beyond, and invitations to meet yourself in ways you've never dared to before. Whether you're walking through shadow or starlight, you belong here. I am Julie, your guide, your mirror, your voice in the void. This is Here to Be Human, and you are right on time. You were taught that anger was dangerous, but what if it's divine? This is Here to Be Human, a multidimensional soul, Season 2, Episode 5, Sacred Anger, when rage is a spiritual frequency. So I'm going to invite you, before we kind of get into all of our teachings and channeled messages from Spirit, I want to invite you to look at this prompt, whether you're going to reflect in the moment or whether you want to write this down and journal it later. This is quite an important question before we begin kind of really delving into it in a bit more deeper throughout the show. So the question to you I'm going to pose is, when was the last time you felt anger and what did you do with it? So when was the last time you felt anger and what did you do with it? Could have been today, could have been 5 minutes ago before you listen to this podcast. And then maybe kind of asking yourself, or kind of sitting with this kind of, I guess, option. What if your rage was sacred and not shameful? Because a lot of the times when we get angry, there's a lot of guilt or shame with it. You know, when we get angry at our kids, whether it's our animals, whether it's at ourselves, there's always, with anger and frustration, there's always a level of guilt or shame that kind of creeps up. And that is something that society has really, I guess, you know, probably in the last 5 to 10 years from what I've seen, really made it out like you can't get angry. And the only time you can get angry or share your frustration is in, you know, the space of like a therapy session or a healing session or somewhere where you're working on yourself. And I think that's the wrong way to approach being human, because we have a range of emotions and, you know, we do compartmentalize and like, oh, that must be anger and that must be frustration. But what if it's a level of overwhelm because you're not being seen and you're not being heard? And so, you know, the other person be like, well, you're just angry and don't know why you're getting angry, when there's like a deeper rooted, you know, trigger that is coming up for that individual. So again, when was the last time you felt anger and what did you do with it? And then what if your rage was sacred and not shameful? And just kind of let that all land, settle into your chest, and just breathe. Just breathe for a moment before we continue. So as we move through our segments, segment 1, this is rage is not the enemy. It is actually the signal. And what that means is that anger is data. So it maps the moments where your boundaries were breached, right? Or your truth was dismissed, or your dignity was ignored. And it's really your body saying, you know, enough is enough. Like, I can't deal with this level of, and fill in the blank, right? Whether it's disrespect or not being heard, or that your truth doesn't matter, whatever it is for you, your body is saying enough is enough. So something has triggered within you And it's not like a fight, flight, protective kind of angle. It's really just your body saying you need to stand up for yourself. Because you're collating all this data, right? And it's like your body's recognizing how many times something like this has made you feel angry. How many times has something like this, created that frustration to run through your nervous system, to run through your energy field. And now it's saying this has happened way too often and you can't ignore it anymore. It's it's not just the universe signaling to you that your emotions are valid. It's now your body saying your emotions are valid. And so we need to take a pause here and understand why you're getting angry, but then coming to the root of what that anger is and trying not to be hard on yourself because of it, but understanding what is the root cause of it and then why it keeps playing out is the key thing here. And that's why we're talking about like the signal. And when we sit in a world that really does prize, composure over authenticity, like, you see it all over like, social media, like, people making it out like their life is absolutely perfect. It's like a display home kind of vibe. And maybe for some people it is, but I would say for the majority of people, life is messy. Houses are messy. Kids get messy. Like things are messy. And it's, even that holding that composure of like, no, love and light, I'm not going to get angry at you, or I'm just going to kind of let you do what you need to do. And, my feelings don't matter. No, that's not you being like authentic. If something upsets you, then it upsets you. I'm not talking about raging anger where you go and physically harm someone with it. I'm talking about allowing yourself to be angry at something because it has hurt you in a particular way or has triggered you in a particular way. Yeah. And like I said, the world does prize, anger and but only if it's like out of rebellion. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm going to like, this. Again, it's anger really is the soul saying, I don't want to be suppressed anymore. That's really what the soul is trying to say to you, because the soul protects itself against suppression. And so when we're trying to maintain composure over being authentic, then down the track, that the anger that is rebellion can get out of control, right? And then that's kind of where we start to feel like more shame kicks in to play. Yeah. So when we've got too much composure and we're shutting down our emotions and feelings, the moment we get angry, we just feel so upset with ourselves. When if we could just acknowledge in the moment, it's not even about you having to acknowledge to other people. Like it could just be acknowledging to yourself, like, you know what, that really pissed me off. I'm really super angry about this. But that's okay. It's okay to get angry. It's okay to feel like that something has hurt you. There's nothing wrong with that. And so when we acknowledge that we are angry, what ends up happening is that the anger gets clarified, right? So you understand where it's coming from, you know why it's happened, and it'll allow you to course correct if it is more, for example, say you don't have balance in your life and your life is all about work, and then, you go out with the kids somewhere and, you get angry at them when all they're asking for is like, oh, mom, dad, can I have an ice cream, right? That anger, again, you don't have to be shameful about it, but if you acknowledge that you were angry in a moment that maybe didn't require that level of response, then you're going to get the clarity to be like, you know what, I think there's not much balance in my life. I'm overworking. My phone's keeps dinging with like emails or whatever. And I'm not really present with my family or with my kid. And if I was more present, then I probably would have enjoyed to go get an ice cream myself with the kid. Do you know what I mean? So, but when we're repressing it, it's going to like corrode within us, right? And then that's what ends up happening when we like, when you see people like exploding and getting super angry and things of that nature. So the one way to look at anger is that anger isn't the opposite of love. It really is love in defense of truth, right? So if you can look at, and again, I'm not talking about like raging anger where it turns into violence and all that type of stuff. I'm talking about like the anger where you get frustrated and you're just like, oh, I shouldn't have let that bother me so much. That's the anger that I'm talking about, right? Again, not the violent aspect of that's on a whole different level. What I'm talking about is the natural frustration and anger that humans have, right? So if you can start to look that love is the defense for anger in order to expose the truth, right? Anger isn't the opposite of love. It's love in defense of truth. And look, if we look at personal stories, and I'll get you to kind of even, jot down, like, from your own experience, like, where have you had moments where anger may have shocked you, but then showed you exactly where you'd been betraying your own truth, right? So if you do have like your personal story journal with you, I would definitely be looking at this. And, I would also use it on a regular basis that if you do have moments where you have gotten angry at something and it kind of threw you a little bit where you're like, oh, I think I went overboard. That was too far. I shouldn't have gotten angry. Come back to this question, because once you know exactly where it's stemming from, or where you have been betraying your own truth, it's going to allow you to then to speak up, really, in order for you to be heard, in order for your truth to be heard. And we've all had those experiences where, we've had those moments and afterwards gone, oh, you know what? I kind of see it now. This is exactly what it showed me. And I feel like if I had spoken up earlier, or if I had shared my needs or desires with this person or in that situation, then maybe I wouldn't have gotten so angry over something. It really is, anger comes from being that feeling of suppression, like being put in a corner, not being understood, someone taking your words and making them something that they're not. Yeah. And that's all aspects of you and your truth, your inner truth, your outer truth, being run by someone or something else. So let's kind of have a look at some channeled messages from Spirit. Okay, let's see what questions have been brought for me today. I'm just going to have a sip of tea. Hang on. Okay, so our first question to Spirit, or that we're going to channel. And again, please, write whatever comes through for you. See what your spiritual team or the source or spirit or God is communicating with you in this moment. So the first question is, what becomes possible when we honor anger instead of fearing it? So what becomes possible when we honor anger instead of fearing it? The first thing that keeps coming up is there will be a sense of freedom. So, and I feel like it's freedom from your own thoughts, your own belief systems, and whatever patterns have been playing out. So whatever story you told yourself that you're not good enough, you can't do this, or you're not deserving of something, the more that you honor that anger instead of fearing it, what's going to become possible for you is to actually be able to be yourself, to feel freedom within who you are. And not just that, but also to explore the different facets of yourself. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned along this journey is the more that you allow yourself freedom from societal like rules, regulations, what is meant to be seen as, attractive or successful or abundant, and, and whatever the opposite of that is, the more that you give yourself freedom to move away from all of that, you end up discovering who you are even more. And I feel like that's the journey that we should all be kind of, you know, bringing into our life, not just kind of like wanting to gain more spiritual clarity or ascension or deeper intuition. I think it's like really uncovering all the layers of who you are. I feel like understanding that version of you, and that version of you is going to continue to grow and expand, because as you age, you have more experiences, you have more wisdom, and you do life differently. With every decade that you move into, you approach things different in your 30s and 40s that you did in your 20s. So I think that freedom, that's what becomes possible, is the freedom to actually know who you are. So, prompt number 2 for our spiritual channeling. Okay. So, how has rage protected us through lifetimes of suppression? Oh, this is interesting. How has rage protected us through lifetimes of suppression? Okay. So, the first thing I keep getting shown is like the great leaders that, ruled countries in the ancient times. We're talking about like, in like Europe and America, and all those kind of what they classify as like the great leaders. None of them were calm. Like that's not how they're depicted in history. Um, and that rage, if I look at like from that angle, their rage allowed them to take over countries, to rule countries, right? So that's from that angle. But then as a society, if you look at humanity, when we're allowed to get angry, we can move mountains as a collective in order to move through suppression. Because a lot of these leaders who gained their power through rage took away, in some instances, not all of them, took away a lot of that freedom from their people. And again, there comes a point with as humans, like, we're looking at the French Revolution and all that type of stuff. The more suppressed we are by people who are blatantly using their truth for harm and not good for the majority, right? Humanity will step into a place of they will be so suppressed that all it takes is one individual, which has always happened if you look at history, one individual to say no. And then that person saying no almost like gives everybody else permission, or everybody else feels validated. And it gives everyone that sense of like, well, if I stand with this person and we stand united together and we share our anger and frustration for the suppression that we're in, it tends to move mountains. And then from that, it feels like it changes the course of how that country is run. And we've seen it time and time again. In our modern world, it's a little bit different with some of the leaders that we have, not all. But we're finding more and more is if we can move away from being inauthentic and looking at like that pretty social media pages where everything is perfect, and we start being real with one another about what doesn't work for us. I mean, we all experienced it with COVID. At the beginning, there was so much fear and anger about what was happening. And then the leaders were able, not all of them, like I said, were able to suppress even more. And then eventually that exploded. Different parts of the world, people stood up for their own rights and their own body. And again, this isn't like a political thing, it's each to their own, but that's how rage has protected us through our lifetimes of suppression. Because as a community, as a collective, that anger has allowed us to shift the needle and create growth and expansion. And we begin to work together as opposed to allowing a individual to dictate and to remove our freedom on a regular basis. That's how rage has protected us. And I'm all for rage and anger in a healthy way that doesn't hurt another individual on purpose or maliciously. Because, like I said, anger brings signal to you for you to gain clarity. So, this is your journal prompt to reflect on. And you can write this again in your journal book. When anger rises in you, could it be clarity, not chaos that's trying to speak? So when anger rises in you, could it be clarity and not chaos trying to speak? And just sit with that for a moment before we move on to segment 2 and see what comes up for you. And it might be right now, if you've recently felt a little bit anger, you might be like, oh, no, I think it was a bit chaos. But if you do get angry, which you will, humans, the next time you get angry or it rises up in you, just see if there is some truth trying to come out. See if it is. And sometimes it can be that you've actually spoken your truth to someone and they repeat the same thing over and over and over again, and you feel like that they're not hearing you. So that's what's coming up to tell you, like, maybe there's a different way to communicate your needs, because clearly how you've done it before, the other person isn't getting it, whether they're not getting it on purpose or, unknowingly, they're just not really understanding what it is that you want. So as we move into segment 2, so this is the difference between destructive and sacred anger. Remember, we're talking about sacred anger here. So anger itself isn't destructive, but disconnection is. So destructive anger lashes out, and that's what we're talking about before. We're not speaking about that destructive anger is safe and all that type of stuff. We're talking about that sacred anger which burns inwardly, right? And that's purifying, not punishing you. Okay, so sacred anger burns inwardly, so it's kind of like that anger that sits within us. And when we allow our sacred anger to come through, what it does is it reveals not just the truth, it reveals a lot to you, or it should reveal a lot to you as to what isn't working. And it could be what's not working in your career, what's not working in your relationship, what's not working in the household, or whatever it is. It's not necessarily about, when you get angry, if you don't know in the moment why you got angry, this is where you need to sit back and examine what the trigger actually was for you. Because destructive anger will always wound you. Yeah, or it would wound somebody else, where sacred anger is always revealing something to you, right? And sacred anger tends to dismantle illusion and not people. So again, this is not about being physically angry at someone. That's that destructive anger. That's that lashing out. But sacred anger dismantles the illusion that is currently at play here. And that's what I feel like you're getting angry at. And so look at it this way, it's the fire of discernment, that sacred no that makes room for a truer yes. And so when fire is aligned with heart, it will clear everything out without cruelty, right? Because sacred anger is you're getting angry, but you're not screaming, you're not lashing out, you're not throwing things, you're not hurting anybody. It's where you may, the anger comes out, you say something that is your truth without hurting the other person. This is not about being cruel. And so that sacred anger, that fire that is aligned with your heart space, it's always going to clear the current situation, clear any illusions that might be playing out. And it's not cruel when it does it, right? That sacred anger is not chaos. It's you being in coherence with what your body, your mind, and your soul is bringing into alignment for you. So here is a prompt that you can look at for your own, your personal story, like in that particular book, unless you have all one book for all your journaling prompts. So from memory, have you had a time where you confused silence with peace? And did it cost you your aliveness? So check in to see if you've had a time when you confused silence with peace and it cost you your aliveness. And what I mean by that is like that, the energy of feeling alive and free and excited. And pretty much what this statement means, and I'm sure most people have been through this, if you have gone through difficult times in your relationships, romantic or otherwise. Sometimes you think, well, they're just silent at the moment. So, okay, everything must be okay. I'm just going to let them deal with this, let them process it. And then I'll ignore whatever this is and I'll bring it up at another day. We can talk about another day. And that's kind of where the more that you shut down anger, the more that you shut down someone else's anger or them not feeling like they can't speak, it just kind of, the staleness in the energy becomes really loud. And that's kind of where we don't want silence to be there. We want to communicate what it is. Otherwise, it's definitely not peace if no one's talking to another. It just means there might be peace in the moment so you don't argue. But, like I said, anger and argument and discussion done in that sacred manner, not in the destructive manner, can really shift the relationship. And it'll either shift it in order for it to grow, and that's what happens most of the times, or it shifts it in order for it to dismantle because maybe it should have been dismantled a long time ago. So that's your personal story prompt. Now, let's have a look at some of the journaling prompts here that I've got for spirit. So the first question for spirit we have is, what does sacred anger burn away and what does it restore? Interesting. What does sacred anger burn away and what does it restore? Sacred anger actually burns away ancestral and karmic patterns that may have been inherited from generations, may have been learnt in our upbringing. And also, it burns away aspects of your identity that you didn't give yourself. And what I mean by that is it's burning away the illusion that people had of you, and that was what they had drummed into you. that this is who you are, this is how it is, this is what you should say, you should do. And so that identity will burn away because it's not who you are. And so what it does restore is a new way of being, new belief systems, new patterns that are actually going to work for you as opposed to against you. And it allows you, like I was saying earlier on, it's going to restore the true version of you, the true identity, the true self to speak up, to be seen, to be heard, to live through you in order for you to continue to evolve and to grow and to find other amazing facets about who you are and what it is that you're wanting to do and bring into this world. Our next journal prompt or channeling prompt really to spirit is, what happens when we confuse silence with peace? So what happens when we confuse silence with peace? It tends to erode whatever has already been built. So if you have built a foundation, and this can be either with another person or a group of people, or even the foundation that you've built for yourself with yourself, and you're really happy with like, this is who I am, this is what I want. I've spent a lot of time working on me, so to speak, or working on this relationship. If we start confusing that silence with peace and not really speaking up or not really trying to understand what the issue is, whether it's within ourselves or someone else, then we erode that foundation that has been built. And if it's the self foundation, to erode who you are would probably be a great detriment to yourself with all the things that you've already been working on. And I think allowing silence to be the norm will never bring you peace. It just can't, because eventually something will either erode to the point where you feel suppressed, or something will happen to the point where it's hard to get back to where we once were. And that's why I think it's important that we address everything and not let silence be the thing that stops us as an individual to grow, or is the death of a connection, because we're not being honest. We're not being honest with ourselves, or we're not being honest with the other person. So your personal reflection point here to pop into your journal and to either reflect on it now or at a later stage is, where have you suppressed anger to stay acceptable, and what has that suppression cost you? And I think we've all done this at various stages in life. Where have you suppressed anger to stay acceptable, and what has that suppression cost you? That's a good one. So I'll give you a moment here to reflect on that or to write it down. And so as we now gently move into segment 3, so this is let rage be ritual. Okay, so fire doesn't need to be extinguished. It needs to be tended. And this is the internal fire within you, right? And ritual is how we contain the flame without caging it. So, and that means how energy moves from reaction into reference, right? Because if we feel caged, if our freedom is taken away, of course, we're going to retaliate, right? But that ritual contains that flame, okay? And sacred expression might look like movement, breath work, drumming, writing, having boundaries, creating affirmations, or even going into a creative space. Have you ever had those moments where you just kind of get all these downloads or insights or ideas and you're on like this creative train where it's just everything is flowing through you? That's really that sacred expression, right? So you're not meant to fear your fire. You're meant to like let it lead with love, right? And I think if we can let the rage that comes within us rather than it coming out and, you know, hurting someone else, if we take that a rage and we like I said before, we kind of, write or we drum or we do affirmations or we channel that into like creative projects, then you end up feeling the fire, right? And you then know how to work with it as opposed to fearing it. And then what ends up happening is if you when you do have rage, your rage won't be like to the point where you can't contain it. You'll be able to pull it back. And then when you need to express it, you'll express it in that sacred manner, not in a destructive manner where, it's causing chaos or hurting someone or possibly even like hurting you. Okay. So our last spirit questions or questions for spirit is, okay, here we go. So how can ritual transmute anger into clarity and power? How can ritual transmute anger into clarity and power? Hmm. When we have practices, and that's what rituals are, it's a practice that you create or that you follow. When we have those practices in place, when you do get angry at something, you will quickly be able to take a step back. So you'll get angry, you won't project it onto anyone, you'll just pause for a moment and have like a wider perspective on the situation at hand, what made you angry and why it made you angry. And then what that does is it gives you answers, it gives you clarity. So you know that if a situation like that presented itself again, most likely it's because of XYZ that's creating the anger, or maybe something that you haven't dealt with, or things that you need to deal with. And then once you have that clarity, knowledge, clarity, answers, that gives you power over whatever you feel is suppressing you or taking away your freedom or not allowing you to be who you truly are. And that's how ritual can transmute that anger into that clarity and that power. Because those practices, whether it is breath work, and when I say practices, I'm talking about it's not necessarily a practice that you do in the midst of like you getting angry. Doing these practices on a regular basis and having them as part of your life, what will end up happening is when you are in a situation, you're placed in a situation where you can feel that anger coming up, it's like your body goes into autopilot and, it might even just force you to like I said, maybe you're in a board meeting or something like that, or, at a work meeting and someone is saying something either about your work or is being quite, putting you down or derogative or whatever it is that they're doing. And it's getting you angry because in that moment you feel like you can't speak or your truth is being manipulated or like it's just people aren't seeing it for what it is. It's like your body goes into autopilot. And what might actually happen is that you might, sit back and you might take a breath and compose yourself and go, why is this getting me angry? And then all of a sudden you start to get the clarity, like you know what it is that you need to say. You know how to be, well, you know how to articulate your point in the matter. And that's what ends up happening when you have these rituals as part of your world, as part of what it is that you do, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's yoga, whether it's breath work, whether it is journaling, whether it is listening to music, or whatever it is for you, playing sports. That ritual is going to set you up for moments like this. But if you don't have those rituals, if you don't have something for your body to be able to support you with in times of stress, then we can feel like the stress is overwhelming and that's what's taking over us. So that's how ritual can transmute anger into clarity and power. And our last spiritual question is, what parts of us are reborn through conscious rage? What parts of us are reborn through conscious rage? Interesting. Let me have a look. The parts of us that are reborn are actually parts of us. On one hand, I keep getting shown like they're parts of us that were taken away, meaning that in our early years, we weren't able to express something, or we were told that we fit into this particular box and thus this is how it has to be. So the real version of you starts to come up, if that makes sense. It's like a new version of you. That's why they keep saying, like, like a reborn version of you starts to come through. And it feels like you're the one who gets to now say who you are, what you do, and where you go. So it's not just a sense of freedom. It's almost like it's not just freedom and identity, which is what we've been able to gauge from today's podcast. It's also the ability to not only speak your truth, but to walk your path with honor and courage. Those are the parts that I feel are reborn through conscious rage. And on the other side of that, I even feel like there's like ancient memories that will be reborn of maybe a past life where, you were a soldier or you were meant to speak up and you were meant to share your voice, but it was suppressed. It's like that you're going to heal that part of you. And that in itself is going to help you move through the next stage of your life, move through the next phase. And you might even discover parts of you that were laying dormant. Maybe you thought, oh no, I'm not a really good public speaker, or I'm not really good at creative writing. And then all of a sudden, the more that you have this conscious rage, the more that you're not feeling suppressed or not feeling caged and you have a sense of freedom, it's like, the world does become your oyster, and you can discover different parts of you that maybe fear held you back from exploring. And those are elements that I feel is like being reborn again. So your reflection prompt today is, what does your fire want to create instead of destroy? So what does your fire want to create instead of destroy? So I give you a moment there before we move into our integration and ritual for the day. Okay, so I just want you to now either stand or sit tall, feet on the ground for me, and your spine long. So sitting upright. Now, I want you to inhale through the nose And then exhale through an open mouth for me. So inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. And I want you now to speak out loud. Now you can say it in your mind if you like, if there's lots of people around you. Or if you're by yourself in your room, then definitely say this out loud. I give myself permission to feel anger. I give myself permission to feel anger. I no longer suppress truth to keep the peace. I no longer suppress truth to keep the peace. I listen to my rage with reverence, not fear. I listen to my rage with reverence, not fear. My anger is sacred. It does not make me dangerous. It makes me clear. My anger is sacred. It does not make me dangerous. It makes me clear. I welcome my fire. I welcome my fire. I honor the part of me that refuses to be silenced. I honor the part of me that refuses to be silenced. Now breathe into the belly. This is your furnace of power. And let the warmth rise without shame. And just ask yourself, what does my rage need from me now? Is it movement, voice, space, permission? And just allow yourself to embody whatever is coming through, whatever you've discovered. And then either move, write whatever came through down, or go on and create something amazing as a way for you to release any pent-up anger or frustration, as it will give you clarity and maybe the answers that you were seeking. So remember, your anger is not your enemy. It's your protector, your compass, your holy disruptor. And in the next episode, it's going to be called Let It Burn. So this is all about transformation, identity, death, and the fire of becoming. That'll be episode 6. So until then, let the rage rise, let it move, and let it teach you who you really are. Thank you for being here fully. If today's episode stirred something in you, if you have a follow-up question, a reflection you'd like to share, or a way this conversation aligned with where you are right now, I'd love to hear from you. And if there are specific questions you'd like me to ask Spirit in future episodes based on what's coming up for you, send me a direct message at here.to.be.human.podcast on the Instagram page. Remember, your voice, your questions, your presence, they're part of this journey too. And if you'd like to connect with me more deeply, you'll find everything, sessions, programs, and updates over at www.moderndaymedium.com.au or on my Instagram page, which is at modern.day.medium. This is your invitation. This is the return. And this is what it means to be human. So until next time, stay with yourself, stay with your soul, and keep choosing this sacred, messy, and miraculous life.